Sabo is 10 years old just beating him up, and as we saw in the manga, he then goes on to spar with Kuma. Hey, what's up everybody? It's LeeLos, and today we're talking about why Sabo is underrated. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals. You're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So let's get started with talking about Sabo. So Sabo is a character that's so strong that if you analyze even a small portion of his power scaling, you realize he's insanely powerful. Even if you lowball him, slandering Sabo has become somewhat more popular over the years. I think most of the slandering done towards Sabo is actually just done to be funny. For example, here's something that happens pretty often. If you ask someone, do you think Sabo is strong? And they say no, if you ask them why, a common response is, oh, he's just carried by narrative. So I don't like him, he's not strong, he's just carried by narrative. And if you ask those same people, okay, well, do you think Mihawk is strong? Typically those same people will say, oh yeah, Mihawk's strong, and you're like, well, why? And it's like, oh, well, because he's got the narrative, right? So he's gotta be strong. So a lot of the time, people will insult Sabo for the exact same thing that they praise Mihawk for. So overall, I think a lot of Sabo slander is actually just people joking around. So today, we're going to analyze Sabo's actual power scaling and explain why he's really powerful even when you lowball him. And we'll also talk about more of the jokes that are typically made about Sabo and see how they compare to the power scaling in the series. We saw that Sabo as a child was a rival to Ace. They were almost exactly equal to one another, if not just actually exactly equal, shown by them battling each other 50 times each day. And one panel shows Sabo winning 24 fights, while Ace wins 26. There's many different types of debates you could do with just these numbers alone. Narratively, this is here to show you that they are very close in power, if not exactly equal with one another. But you could also make arguments like, out of the 24 fights Sabo won, maybe he won the last 10 in a row. So by the end of each day, Sabo was just overall stronger than Ace. But let's not use that argument, let's just say they're almost exactly equal to one another, with Ace maybe being the smallest amount stronger. Now, this was when they were children, both doing the exact same training. At age 10, Sabo is picked up by the Revolutionary Army. Then for the next 7 years, he debatably has better training than Ace. While Ace is still in the same mountains, and in complete honesty, Ace's training might have actually gotten worse because Sabo was no longer there to challenge him. All he had was the environment that they were already living in, and absolutely no effort defeating Luffy. Ace later goes on to say that Luffy never beat him a single time, so if you think about it, they were fighting 50 times a day, and Ace was just winning 50 fights every single day, and just staying in the same environment that made him and Sabo basically equal prior. Meanwhile, Sabo's actually a part of the Revolutionary Army. We actually get panels seeing him train with characters like Kuma. There's a lot of power scaling that can be done here, which results in Sabo being immensely powerful. But let's save that for a bit later, and let's wrap up this lowball interpretation of Sabo. By the time we see Sabo in Dressrosa, he's stated to be the second highest position in the Revolutionary Army, with the only one ahead of him being Dragon. It's heavily implied that not only is he the second highest rank, he is literally the second strongest person in the entire Revolutionary Army, even before he eats the devil fruit. This is an insane feat because it could include characters like Kuma, but let's leave that out for a more medium ball interpretation and first just focus on Eva, because it's almost guaranteed that Sabo would scale above Eva. In the One Piece community, it's a common argument to talk about mental nerfs, making characters weaker, with a large example being feats performed by the admirals. Rayleigh supports this concept. When he's teaching Luffy Haki, Rayleigh states that having doubt makes you weaker. Since Haki is willpower, this concept makes sense, and it's one of the things that supports the idea of mental nerfs. Essentially, if a character is fighting with doubt, their Haki might be weaker. This argument is often used on the admirals, but it could also be used on Eva versus Kuma during the Marineford War. Knowing their backstory, Kuma is one of Eva's best friends, and before they even begin fighting, he's begging Kuma to remember who he is. But then when Eva gets angry and actually starts fighting, Eva is kind of destroying Kuma. Throughout the entirety of their fight in the manga, we never see Kuma land a single attack on Eva, and we see Eva throwing Kuma around. So you could make the argument that even while mentally nerfed, Eva is strong enough to throw Kuma around. Even ignoring the mental nerf argument, this fight implies that they're at least somewhat relative to each other, and you could honestly make an argument that Eva might actually be slightly stronger. But let's just keep lowballing Sabo and just say that Eva's relative to Kuma, and Sabo, even without the Devil Fruit, is stronger than Eva. And he would also be stronger than all of the other revolutionary commanders, characters that were able to hold their own against a nerfed version of Fujitora and Green Bull. Something that CP0 states is still impressive even though the admirals were holding back. They say that the Revolutionary Army commanders were strong. Again, Sabo with no Devil Fruit would be stronger than all of these guys and Eva. We also see him basically bullying Burgess before he even gets the fruit as well. Burgess being a 1st Division commander, typically with pretty much every character, they assume that 1st Division commanders are strong, but because Sabo destroyed Burgess so easily, people began assuming Burgess is not that powerful of a 1st Division commander. There is a possibility that he is, and Sabo is just genuinely that strong, but again, let's keep lowballing them and say maybe Burgess is a weaker commander, scales above him comfortably even without using the fruit. Then Sabo gets the Devil Fruit on top of all of this. And this Devil Fruit is so powerful that powerful fighters from all across the New World sailed all the way to participate in this dangerous Dressrosa tournament just for a chance to get the fruit. You could also make the argument that maybe a lot of the fighters didn't know about the fruit and were just there to fight, but there is some statements that heavily imply that fighters went there mainly for the fruit. Blackbeard sent Burgess all the way there for a chance at getting it. But anyway, let's lowball all of this and just say Sabo gets this really strong fruit on top of already being stronger than Eva, a character who is relative to Kuma. There are some things that imply Sabo might actually be a genius when it comes to using this Devil Fruit, because the first day he gets the fruit, he's doing techniques that Ace never performed, one of which being the Flame Dragon King, where he's amping his Dragon Fist martial art with the Flame Fruit on top of that. And Sabo goes on in the same arc to fight Fujitora, an admiral, and at the very beginning of their battle, after absolutely low diffing a Vice Admiral, Sabo states that he's still struggling with controlling these powers. He's genuinely not used to them yet. Despite this, he fights Fujitora for about 7 chapters straight anyway. It's stated that Fujitora is holding back during this battle, and he's clearly shown to be a bit stronger than Sabo still, but it should be noted, halfway through the fight, Sabo states, "I can tell you're holding back. I know admirals are stronger than this." Then Fujitora releases more of his power. Sabo says, "That's more like what I was expecting," and then just counters his attack anyway. This is showing you that yes, Fujitora is stronger than Sabo, but Sabo is strong enough to hold his own, literally fighting an admiral for about 7 chapters and not lose. Even though Fujitora is holding back, that is still a very impressive feat. We literally see Sabo counter a named attack from Fujitora. This is very impressive, especially when you consider that Sabo literally starts the fight saying that he can't really control these powers yet. He just got the fruit. Then Sabo goes on to become considerably more powerful than this. Not only does he get stronger from his missions after this, he also is shown to be a character that trains using this Devil Fruit on his own. Then on top of all of that, you can make the argument that he would get hockey blooms from his fights in Dressrosa. You're starting to see, even when we lowball Sabo, he's already becoming a very powerful character. Even when you lowball him, it's really challenging to find any way to possibly put Sabo below the 1st Division commander level characters. It's almost impossible to do that. Really think how many characters below 1st Division commander level could counter named attacks from an admiral, even if they're holding back. How many characters can actually do that aren't just 1st Division commanders? Especially since it's a popular debate on admirals being relative to the Yonko. We literally see characters like Big Mom, while she's massively nerfed, still scales considerably above 1st Division commanders. There's statements saying that Big Mom could solo her entire crew, meaning the 1st Division commander like Katakuri, all of their commanders, all of their armies, everything working together is just nothing compared to Big Mom. And there is more debatable scenes like Big Mom versus Queen, but that's more debatable. Then you see Sabo countering a named attack from Fujitora who's holding back, but Sabo himself admits that he could not really control his powers yet, and then goes on to become far more powerful than this. You see, even when you're lowballing Sabo, it's very challenging to put him anything below 1st Division commander level, especially when you consider the fact that many consider the admirals to be relative to the Yonko. Meanwhile, Big Mom's entire crew doesn't think they'd be able to defeat a nerfed version of Big Mom. Even saying Sabo would be just relative to somebody like Katakuri really starts to just seem like a lowball. So now let's talk about more of the medium to high ball interpretations for Sabo. So the medium ball interpretation of Sabo would just simply be to say that he represents Ace if Ace never died, and he might even be stronger than Ace would have been if Ace never died. In the manga, all we see from Sabo's training during his childhood in the Revolutionary Army, all we see is him sparring with Kuma. Oda worked with the anime on episode 737 to expand this scene. Oda actually contributed to this episode and wrote notes for it, so it's somewhat debatable on whether you want to take this episode as canon or not. It's around as canon as the Vivre cards would be, maybe even slightly more so, because Oda himself directly wrote notes for this episode, and it expands upon things that were already in the manga. Many people just consider this episode to actually be canon, but let me know what you guys think about this. Either way, in this episode of One Piece, we see that Sabo's feats during his training are absolutely insane. At 10 years old, he's already strong enough to defeat the fishman Hack, a fishman that knew fishman karate. Sabo is 10 years old, just beating him up. And as we saw in the manga, he then goes on to spar with Kuma. But the real crazy feats are the things that he performs at age 17. There's a scene where we see Ace leaving the island at age 17. Then we immediately go over to see what Sabo's doing at age 17. He's in the middle of a battlefield using armament hockey and observation hockey and taking on entire castles full of enemies by himself. It's almost guaranteed that this version of Sabo has genuinely surpassed Ace. It would logically make sense as well, seeing how they were extremely relative to each other when they had the same training. Now Sabo is debatably getting far better training, and he's had far better training for 7 years straight. Meanwhile, Ace was just stuck with Luffy fighting an actual weakling compared to himself, and exploring the same environment they were already surviving in at age 10. So there's a good argument for Sabo simply having better training than Ace for 7 years and surpassing him. Also, the Ace light novels back up this idea even further, with Ace not even using armament hockey until right before he entered the New World. Even then, the first time he uses armament hockey in the light novel, he's not even aware how he's doing it. It's literally right before they enter Fishman Island is the first time he does it. But it's debatable on whether or not the light novel is canon as well. Another scene that happens in the following episode of One Piece is episode 738. This is a very highball interpretation of Sabo, and this one's very debatable on whether or not it's actually canon, as it's confirmed that Oda wrote notes for episode 737, but it's not confirmed if the same is true for episode 738. Maybe this scene was leftover notes from 737 and it just went over into episode 738 due to pacing. It's a debatable thing, so let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. There's a scene in episode 738 where they show a 20-year-old Sabo, and he already has the position of Chief of Staff. That's the same position he has in Dressrosa as the rank 2 in the Revolutionary Army. Based on this anime episode, 20-year-old Sabo, while Ace was in Marineford, Sabo might have already been the second strongest member of the entire Revolutionary Army, surpassing characters like Eva and maybe even Kuma at just 20 years old. This almost guarantees that 20-year-old Sabo was stronger than Ace, even though Ace has a devil fruit, because a battle between Ace and Kuma is very debatable during Marineford. That's a very debatable thing on its own, but based on this anime episode, Sabo literally might have already surpassed Kuma at 20 years old. Keep in mind, this is a highball interpretation. Sabo might have already surpassed Kuma at just 20 years old, then goes on to get stronger on top of that. Now, when we get to Dressrosa and we actually see Sabo, the medium ball interpretation would just be, imagine Sabo is the same thing as Ace if Ace never died. This medium ball interpretation would be more of a narrative argument. The episode where he's introduced is literally titled The Man Who Inherits Ace's Will. The highball interpretation of Sabo is that Sabo, even without the devil fruit, already represents Ace if Ace never died, and he might even be stronger than Ace if Ace never died, even without the devil fruit. Then he gets the devil fruit and becomes even stronger than that. The highball interpretation of Sabo just becomes absolutely insane. The highball interpretation of Sabo is you just take every feat he does at its highest interpretation. The feats that he's performing against Burgess, just assume Burgess is actually relative to other First Division commanders. He would low diff a lot of First Division commanders the same way that he low diff Burgess. And honestly, even including the fact that Fujitora is holding back, that scaling still works. Admirals are considerably stronger than First Division commanders, so for Sabo to be able to low diff a First Division commander and then be outperformed transformed by an admiral even while the admiral's holding back still works with the scaling of One Piece. Especially for the people who want admirals to be strong, this really shouldn't be a problem. And then Sabo goes on to become much stronger than this through training, through hockey blooms, and through going on adventures. This is the medium to highball interpretation of Sabo. Just imagine Ace if Ace never died. How strong would he be? That's who Sabo narratively represents. So in current chapters, he would be weaker than the admirals, but stronger than essentially every First Division commander, and he would be somewhat relative to the admirals, but still below them. Still below characters like Fujitora and Green Bull. Now the highball interpretation of Sabo, the most you can put him to is almost equal to Fujitora. It is hard to say that he's surpassed Fujitora at this point in the series. I personally think that Sabo is still a bit below Fujitora overall. I don't think he's equal to Fujitora yet. I think he's relative to him, but just still a bit below. Now that's the scaling for Sabo. The last thing to talk about in this video is let's talk about the most popular scene where Sabo gets slandered. It is the rescuing Cobra scene. Now this one I'm pretty sure for the most part is just a joke, but let's just do an actual analysis on this scene. Sabo shows up and he attacks all of the 5 elders and Emu at the same time by himself, which is just more proof of Sabo being very similar to Luffy. He's very reckless and just does crazy stuff. That's one of the most Luffy things pretty much any character has ever done in all of One Piece. And then immediately after this, literally one of the first things that Cobra says to Sabo is, "You can escape on your own." Cobra's literally telling Sabo to just leave him there because on his own he'd be able to escape, but Cobra's saying if Sabo tries to save Cobra at the same time, he's not going to be able to escape. This is one of the first things that Cobra says to Sabo, and this one statement debunks the entire Sabo slander all on its own. I'm not sure why this isn't just spoken about more often, because it's actually just one of the first things that Cobra says. He literally says, "You can escape on your own." But Sabo tries to save him anyway, and it turns out that Cobra was right. As Sabo's running away, he gets stabbed by Emu. Cobra gets up and sacrifices himself, and Sabo does exactly what Cobra said he thought he could do. He escapes by leaving Cobra. So to be honest, I'm not sure how the slander still keeps going, because this one panel pretty much explains the whole scene, but yeah, I mean, that's the point of the scene. It's Cobra said, if you try to bring me with you, you're not gonna escape. If you leave me here, you will. And Sabo proves that to be true. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much the whole scene, because I mean, the alternative to it is basically people saying they think Cobra 1v6 battled the 5 elders and Emu by himself, talking about Cobra as if he's strong enough to actually hold off all 5 elders and Emu at the same time, like he's some super like Pirate King level combatant. That's kind of what the Sabo slander is. You basically have to say that Cobra is actually one of the strongest characters in all of One Piece, so powerful that he can actually hold off 5 elders by himself plus Emu while he's injured too. I'm pretty sure it's just a joke. The scene was pretty straightforward. The scene starts with Cobra saying, if you go on your own, you'll be able to escape. If you bring me with you, you won't. And then that's exactly what happens. So I'm not sure how, like, honestly, I don't. So yeah, honestly, I don't really know how the slander like actually keeps going. I'm not sure, because it's literally the first thing Cobra says, so I don't really know how the slander became like a popular joke in the first place. I don't know. Yeah, I guess it just comes down to, what do you think is more likely? Do you think it's more likely that Cobra can 1v6 the 5 elders and Emu by himself? Or do you think it's more likely that what Cobra said at the start of the scene is actually accurate? So here's another thing you could say. People like to talk about how just having one arm is a nerf. They say that for Shanks, which is true. And it's also stated again for Rocks. When he's carrying his wife with one arm, they're saying that he's weakened by doing that. We see Sabo, he's carrying Cobra with one arm. And it makes you wonder, can Sabo even use half of his powers to escape while carrying Cobra? Like, can Sabo turn into fire while carrying Cobra, or would Cobra just get set on fire? You know, like, so these are just other things you can say. Like, maybe Cobra was just right. Like when he leaves Cobra, he actually does just escape. If you want to argue that it's more likely that Cobra 1v6 was able to hold back 5 elders, I think actually in their transformed states as well. One of them can literally fly, by the way. So what was Cobra doing? Like, was he jumping in the air, punching them in the head, like stopping all of them, doing a crazy like Whitebeard level combo on these guys? Or was it really you know, just what the scene starts with. Maybe those words were put there because that's what actually happened. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole Sabo video. He's insanely powerful. Yeah, that's everything I wanted to say in this one. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the views in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I'll see ya on the next one.